Well, let's get started. Okay,
Yes,
so we're
let's.
today with Josh Matthews, founder of Endeavor Staff. And Josh, why don't we just hop right in? Tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're raised, college, previous jobs. Give us a little background.
I thought this was only like an hour. I didn't know we had like the next 3 days to go over everything. But I'll try and do the short. I'll try and do the short version. So I run Endeavor Staffing and the SalesforceRecruiter.com. It's a small niche staffing firm. I got my start in Massachusetts, where I was born, and I was raised in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and eventually traveled out to California for college. I was really a gypsy through college. I bounced around from Whittier College, San Francisco State, eventually finishing up my coursework at the University of Utah. And I was an art major, which means I'm qualified to be a recruiter, and that's about it. So not much. And then I made my way out here to Portland back in '96. And with the exception of a few years overseas in Australia, where I was running staffing firms over there, the majority of my adulthood since age 23, 24 has been here in Portland, Oregon, which, by the way, had a snowstorm and power is out for about 200,000 of us. So I'm at a different property today than I would normally be at my home.
Cool. So how long ago did you start this business?
I started this business almost 2.5 years ago. And it's not my first time having this company, but I started this iteration of it in October of 2017. 2017? I think 2017, maybe 18. 2.5 years ago, whatever that math is.
All right. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what you do, what your typical day is like?
Sure. So what the business does is we specialize in placing professionals in the Salesforce ecosystem, both in technical and functional roles, with Salesforce partners. And so those are companies that support the Salesforce software, either from a delivery standpoint and implementing it and integrating it with their clients, or developing applications that sit on top of the platform. And there's a lot of different companies that Salesforce owns and has, brought under its umbrella, like Demandware, which became, one of the Commerce Cloud iterations, MuleSoft, Tableau, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, CPQ. So there's a lot of different technologies under the Salesforce umbrella. And so we hire people for predominantly direct hire, direct placement, headhunting, recruiting for these Salesforce partners. And then we also place contractors as well.
All right.
As far as a typical day, there's like most small business owners, there's typically not a typical day. I can talk about a typical week and what's involved in that, and it just kind of depends on where things are going. I can tell you that the week really starts Sunday night when I'm planning out my week and my calendar and going through all of my my task list software and trying to iterate and make sure that I'm focused on the most important dollar productive activities. And that's generally a mix of doing client outreach through email and LinkedIn marketing campaigns, having interviews with candidates, having conversations and meetings with my clients, doing actual marketing and promoting the business through various social media outlets. LinkedIn is my number one, but I do some other things like having a YouTube channel called Josh Force, where I produce some videos that help candidates and clients with their hiring as well. And then the rest of that time is spent managing my small team around their activities and their productivity and efficiency.
Cool. So how did you didn't just all of a sudden start this business from scratch? Like, how did you get started? You had some experience recruiting, right?
That's right. I started in recruiting back in 1999. I was part of a dot-bomb layoff at the time. And I was sitting at lunch when I got the phone call, along with about 59, 60 other people who did what I did for this dot bomb out of San Francisco. And he said, "Oh, you should call my friend Francis." Francis had a small staffing company. So I did. And 30 days later, I was hired, and it was my first job as a recruiter. And we helped service a large $3 billion privately held company. And I did that in a couple different iterations, but with that same company for 4 years, and then switched to contractor agency recruitment, where you work with a variety of different clients, not just one. And My career progressed from there, from, basically recruiter to account executive to a division director. And then I spun off and I did this business on my own for a little bit, relocated to Australia and was an acting national director for the largest scientific staffing firm in Australia for some time, did consulting, came back, went back to a company that I'd worked at before, a very large Fortune 500 staffing firm, and was a vice president there, had a lot of success, grew the team from 1 to 12, broke all the records that we'd previously set with my team 12 years earlier. On the day I broke those records, I left and opened up this business.
That's wild. So it's about a 20-year journey. You knew you could do it. It was just a matter of getting out of stopping working for someone else and starting to work for yourself.
That's right. Look, there's a lot of downsides to working for yourself, and everybody knows what they are. And they're 4-letter words, and it starts with R, and it's a big old risk, right? How are you going to get paid, and how effective can you be? When we're an employee for another company, it's pretty straightforward. This is our job. We clock in, we knock out our job, and maybe those jobs don't clock out till midnight that night. Who knows? But I'll tell you, I had this experience when I was reading a book called Purple Cows or something like that. Purple Cows by Seth Godin, who's a great marketing blogger. And there was a cartoon in there with 2 frames. And in that cartoon, it showed the first frame showed a guy in a cubicle with the boss looking at him through the glass window. And this guy had a thought bubble, and it said, the harder I work, the sooner I can be the boss, or the sooner I can be king, or whatever it was, right? And then the next frame showed the guy looking out the office window, the internal office window onto the cube farm at this guy. And his thought bubble was, the harder he works, the longer I get to stay boss. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks, like, crap, ain't that the truth? And I'll tell you, I always worked my tail off for the companies that I worked for. And, I got the trophies and I got paid well and all that stuff was great, but the lion's share, of course, went to them. And the risk was always there because I didn't necessarily 100% agree with the way business was being done or with some of the constraints around doing business. I can be outspoken at times. That didn't always sit well in a Fortune 500 company. And so, it just seemed like, okay, now's the time, right? I could go get another job. I could elevate my comp even more. I'm viable, but where does that leave me when I'm 50 or 55 or 60? And am I going to have the kind of life and lifestyle that I really want, plus the compensation, right?
Yeah.
When do I get to be the boss? VP title at a big company doesn't mean you're the boss. It's really difficult to be the boss until it's your company, I think.
Yeah. Well, speaking of compensation, so how do you make money now with your business?
Well, I make money by placing candidates with my clients, and my clients pay a percentage fee, typically based off of someone's first year base compensation. So if someone's a $150,000 a year person, then I'll earn somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range on placing that individual. It sounds like a lot of money to find someone, place them in a job, but I can assure you it's very difficult. It can be very, very difficult, particularly in my industry where for the positions that I service, like project managers, business analysts, technical architects, Salesforce and software developers, and consultants and vice presidents of sales, and these types of roles, it's really a 0% unemployment. Everyone's working. Anyone who can and wants to work has a job. And so it's quite a lot of work to be able to cut through the noise, develop the trust and the rapport with the passive candidate market, and then make really good sound decisions that are going to service the clients that I serve really, really well, so that they can make more money and they can be successful.
Yeah. So when you first started, how long did it take you to become profitable?
About 4 to 6 weeks. It didn't take very long. I think I carried a little bit of debt in that first year. It's pretty normal, right? Mm-hmm. But I had a friend who needed some help identifying someone not in the Salesforce ecosystem, but needed to find an operations manager for their business, and gave me the job order. I went after it, found him a really terrific guy. He's still there. This is, almost 3 years later, and they love him, and he's done an amazing thing for their practice. And that gave me basically $20,000 of startup money plus whatever else I had saved. And that just bought me enough time to really figure out what niche do I want to do. I actually invested in coaching, about $7,000 or $8,000 in coaching. Even though I was pretty good at what I did, I knew that I needed to update my skill set a little bit. Best $7,000 I've ever spent, really was terrific. And then launched into week after week after week of 15-hour days.
Yeah.
Just scrambling so fast, running so fast, especially in that first 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. So in those first few months, was there any time that you were like, oh my, I should not be doing this. I made the wrong choice?
No, not at all. I had absolute conviction in my ability to deliver good clients. I actually picked a niche that it's not that hard to get a job order, right? Or to identify a client who wants to work with you and get a job order. The hard part is finding the candidates. And that's where I had a lot of confidence. A lot of my competition, they're under 30, they're limited in their depth of experience in business at all, much less in recruiting practices. And so I felt a lot of confidence in my ability to deliver. So yeah, I didn't really have any doubt at all. I had the support of my family, which is very important. And I had to, I think, really adjust. I knew I had to work on myself to get this to work, right? It wasn't just about logging the hours. It was changing the systems, changing the style of engagement that I had with the marketplace in general, my messaging. I had to learn so many new things like marketing. Really, at the end of the day, my business is a marketing company, and then it's a recruiting company, right? I really don't do sales calls. I don't cold call. I don't do any of that stuff that was was de rigueur for the industry that I was in for 20 years. I didn't do any of that, not a single one. Everything was just all learning how to be a really good digital marketer. And that way I could focus on identifying good candidates.
Yeah. So how did that first customer come to you? How did you get the first one?
Yeah, it was from my friend, right? Someone that you
That's
know.
awesome.
Yeah. And he had a law practice and said that they needed to identify a really good operations person. Could I help? And I took on the search and placed a great guy. Like I said, he's still there. So that was the very first win. And then the second win, and it didn't come for several more months. Actually, no, maybe it came like 6 or 8 weeks later, was a client that I'd worked with for at least 10 years, but hadn't done any business with for some time. And so they were outside of the non-compete that I'd negotiated with my prior employer. And, that might've been like a little 10K, 6, 8, 10K deal. It was just enough to just kind of keep feeding the hungry new business engine. And then the third one also came from someone that I'd worked with. I served him years ago. He was a CIO at a large ad agency, and I helped identify a good software engineer for his team. And so those first 3 placements had nothing to do with Salesforce and really everything to do about my network and my relationships.
Yeah. Well, kind of interesting. That's how we get started. A little bit of a soft runway before we start, finding customers and clients that we've never met before that are now starting to find us.
Exactly.
Cool. So I think you mentioned LinkedIn. Is that sort of like your number one way now of acquiring new business?
Yeah, I'd say between LinkedIn and email marketing campaigns, right? I would say both of those are intrinsic to my ability to identify and qualify new, and attract new clients. But I think that there are some other ways that help impact the successfulness of that, such as your involvement in social media, developing a YouTube channel, really kind of trying to differentiate yourself as an expert in the space that you're operating in, right? As a voice of, maybe just a different voice, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe a different perspective. I think kind of cutting to the chase. And as one person I know talks about it, dividing the herd. Like if you try to be all things to everyone,
Right.
Good luck. right? But when you're a small business, it's much better to divide the herd, figure out who are the people who absolutely love your style and engage with those. And when you do that, everyone's happier and you're going to be more successful.
I hear this objection from other people who want to start a business. They have an idea and then they go online and they find that other people are already doing it. And I think that speaks to what you just said. I mean, they don't realize that there's opportunities to really niche down with the internet. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of other recruiters out there, but your style is going to, match up and identify with certain people that other people aren't. And that's going to be plenty of business to sustain you.
Absolutely. It's a really critical point. I'm glad you brought it up because it's super important. And I'll tell you, Mike, before I even picked this niche, I did a lot of research, which is not like me. I'm like a little bit more shoot from the hip, like, okay, let's go. Right. Yeah, it feels good. And that's not always going to be the best way to move forward any more than being overly rigid about numbers is to decision making. Right. So it's got to be a good balance. So before selecting this specific niche, I ran the numbers on all of the different skill sets that I'd placed in the past, looked at, where is it what is the hardest niche to identify really good people with the highest levels of compensation and a track record of massive growth over the last five to 10 years. Right. So I looked at all of that stuff and I tried to replicate I really tried to replicate what happened to SAP in the 90s and in the early 2000s, where it's so hard to find these people, but they're making $200 an hour, right? So if you can find them, you can be successful, right? So that's what I tried to mimic and copy. And then once I started to get involved in it and began working with clients and getting more and more involved in the community, I recognized too that it was much easier for me to market to the Salesforce partners than to the Transamericas, the Nordstroms, United Health Group, all of the large companies that employ dozens or even hundreds of Salesforce professionals. Just it's so much easier for me to identify who the leaders are with the right size of business to go after so that I can actually be an exclusive recruiter. And that is what I do, right? So if someone's working with me 9.5 times out of 10, there's no competition on the job order. And that's unlike, I would say, 95% of all the other recruiters out there. So I'm able to get that exclusivity and then consequently, of course, deliver on that promise and have great, strong relationships with the CEOs of these companies, which typically range from, about 250 people or less versus going after the 500,000 person Accentures of the world and competing for absolutely every little opening out there against 20 other companies. It's not much fun for me.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What's the toughest decision you've had to make in the last few months?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think the toughest decisions are almost always they're really around one or two things, right? And it's where you invest your time. So do I continue to invest my time in this client or do I fire them, right? And do I continue to invest my time in this employee or do I let them go, right? That's really it. It's just a time question. Right?
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to balance out what's the risk reward on each of them because there's opportunity costs. If you work with a client and they're non-responsive and they, like in my case, like if they don't interview the people, even though you're sticking your neck out and saying, you're crazy not to interview this person and they still don't, you really have to question whether or not that's a client that you want to serve anymore, right?
Right.
I mean, I have clients that I spent, 2 months cranking hard on, never got a deal with, never made a dime, cost me thousands of dollars in advertising for candidates and, for my employees and staff and all the work that they put into it. And it never paid for itself. And then firing them, firing those clients and look, we're not a good fit. Those are the toughest decisions, but the toughest is usually the employees. When do you cut bait and when do you invest in them even more?
Yeah. Well, that's sort of the fun part, I think, of having our own business is, playing around with these different marketing strategies,
right?
Sort of finding out what's going to stick, what's going to yield the best result, and then mining that.
Yep. exactly.
All right, Josh, what do you think it is that makes you successful?
Oh, good question. I think it's a combination of factors. I think there's just kind of like an inherent drive,
Mhm.
and I think part of that too, honestly, is around who you surround yourself with. I once heard that you are the average of the people you spend time with, right? And I've come to believe that more and more, right? And so when I look at my friends, if I look at my close knit group of friends, you among them, that I've been tight with for anywhere between 15 and 20 years, right? Um, they're all business owners, all of them. Like all of them have their own business, or they are like a significant shareholder in a business, or they own a brokerage, that's part of a larger organization. But at the end of the day, they're running their own business. And I think when you surround yourself with other business owners and colleagues who understand what it's like, you can't help but get inspired by those around you, learn from their mistakes, and feel supported when you're hitting some of those really challenging and difficult roles, or roads ahead. So probably it's like my peer group is probably the number one reason why I think I'm successful. There are other factors, right? Getting enough sleep, having the right kind of energy, having
Yeah.
drive, being goal oriented, and then all of those avoidance behaviors of like never wanting to have a freaking boss ever again in my life. Like some of those, like, we run towards things and we
Mhm.
run away from them too. And it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of that push and pull, I think, to get people in that mindset of how to be successful. So yeah, all that other stuff is hitting just fine. But if I was doing this and I was friends with, in my peer group, and while it's nothing wrong with it, but my peer group worked at grocery stores and were baristas and, drove Uber for a living, like I can't imagine that I would have as much inspiration and drive, or really self-belief that this is something that's possible. So surrounding yourself with other business owners, I think, is absolutely critical, who are successful, like who are good. You can
Yeah.
you can be friends with business owners who aren't good at business. Like those are going to be the relationships that pull you down. But if you surround yourself with people who are growing and want to do well and want to contribute to society and want to be successful and just get a little bit better every day or every week or every month or every year, when you're surrounding yourself with those folks, you can't help but get better yourself.
Yeah. It's like having our own kind of private mastermind group.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, what has been so far, what's been your most satisfying moment?
I think my most satisfying moment was getting debt down to zero. That was awesome. I had some loans and I had, I don't, it wasn't a lot, but it was a couple maxed out credit cards and a bank loan and all the things that we have to do to survive some of those lean months. My sales cycle could be 3 months, 4 months out. I get a deal and then I might not get paid for 3 or 4 months, right? And so, sort of covering some of those dry times, in that first year. And so getting to that point where it was like, oh my God, the only thing I owe money on is my house. That was a really like watershed moment for me. And it just felt great. And I know for a fact I couldn't have done it just staying in the job that I was at, or maybe even whatever successive position I would have accepted afterwards. I could only do it because I gave myself a pay raise when I took on the risk of having my own business.
Yeah, it's just such a big deal. I know we've talked about this a lot. It's such a big difference going from, working for someone else, particularly in sales, and maybe getting 10 or 15% of whatever you sell.
Yeah.
And then your own business, you're like, oh, I get to keep all of this. Of course, you
Yeah.
have expenses, but it's 100% of it is yours.
Yeah. And my business isn't that much. 5-6 grand a month to run it. Like that's not much,
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So what are you excited about going into the future? Is there any trends or anything that excite you?
Well, look, the trend in my industry is great, right? I'm not in hospitality. I'm not, in hotels or restaurants or or airlines and some of these other industries that have been massively negatively impacted by COVID. The industry that I'm in is hot. It's like on fire right now. So, I'm excited that I think I made a good choice, right? And I also felt like, I knew when I started this, I knew some recession was coming. I didn't know where. I don't I can't predict the future, but everybody knows when it's cranking like it did in 2018 and 2019, everybody, I've been through a few recessions as in business already. Like you can see it, you can feel it coming, right? Who knew that it was going to be a disease that kills thousands and thousands of people? It's horrible. But it happened. And so I'm just glad that I ran as fast as I did. Now it's really about, I think, servicing and delivering to the clients that I serve. And then the next level is really about growth of the business. And that's going to happen through additional employees more than anything, getting help because, I could hire 5 people tomorrow and they could all be super busy with work. There's enough work to go around for everybody.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to ask you about, and that's sort of, I know we've talked about hiring like that first employee. That feels to me like, it felt to me like that was a big step.
Yeah.
Like that was almost more risky than starting the business. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I did it. And, I think I had to go through a couple, I had to kind of like test it out, try some folks out, just Upwork stuff, man, like overseas support.
Mm-hmm.
I think when someone's got a small business, it can be really tempting to like, okay, I'm going to hire an administrative assistant or an executive assistant or an operations person or a salesperson. But if you're the person with all the knowledge, right, finding someone who can do that $5, $10, $15, $20 an hour activity for you so that you can focus on that $100, $150, $200 per hour activity, that's the best investment that you can make. Just understand it takes a little bit of time to get someone properly trained. And I can tell you right now, I should probably have 5 different titles, but Jessie has been with me for over a year. She lives in the Philippines. She's super dedicated. She's a joy to work with. She's got the best attitude in the world. I love working with her. I love her whole family. She takes good care of me. I take good care of them. And it's a really great relationship. And she makes every day more joyful and fun to be part of this business. Honestly, man, like I'll even get her online, just be like, okay, I've got to do all these things. And she'll just hang out with me and make sure I get it done. I'll be like, what's next? Well, now you need to review these people. Okay. And I don't mind paying her to just hang out with me while I'm trying to get the stuff done that I know I put off. She helps me with that, right? She's worth, I'd pay her tenfold what I do if I could. So she's just fantastic. So don't settle for employees that are subpar, but understand too that, she and I are at this point now in our working relationship because we've had more than one, hard conversation about expectations. And we've looked carefully at what the minimum things are that have to happen for the relationship to be sustained. And she's also been rewarded for making those achievements like pretty quickly, right? And given raises and bonuses, not just dinky little ones, but good ones that really make a difference in her life and to the life of her family. So there's a great opportunity for anyone who's starting really small to start small with their first employee and look at the contingent workforce on a platform like Upwork. I've had the most success with folks who live in the Philippines from an assistant standpoint or from a support standpoint than I have from other countries. For what it's worth, it can be a little bit risky, but you don't have to hire a bunch of people. I've got a guy who helps with my Bullhorn development. I've got someone else who helps me, with my bookkeeping. I've got someone else. I've got a web developer. We talk at least once a week, and he's on retainer with me. And so he supports my website. I've got other people who help me with marketing or identifying emails. Like I've probably got 5 or 6 different people, ancillary people, and they're just paid on a per job or per hour basis. I don't need a full-time staff to do that. So it's quite affordable to operate like a larger business without having to spend as much money.
Yeah. Well, especially those overseas folks, when you get them trained and up to speed, like you said, they can be just phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Just a couple more here. What advice would you give to your younger self?
How much younger? Because that would depend.
Well, let's say you're maybe your 25-year-old, 30-year-old self, like you're just kind of getting your career going.
Yeah.
Looking back 20 years, what would you say?
Yeah, God, God, that's a really good question. Don't get into recruiting. It's a cutthroat business. It's hard. I mean, I do well at it, but it's, it's not the easiest job in the world. Probably not that. I'd probably just make a recommendation to invest, continue to invest more in knowledge of other areas like marketing, right? I've never been the guy who stays up to date on all the periodicals of cutting edge sales techniques or cutting edge marketing techniques. That's just not me. It'll probably never be me, right? But like figure out a way to differentiate yourself, right? Find out what works, right? And just like be out of debt as early as possible. Like, don't get the bigger house. Don't buy the Mercedes. Don't get the Beamer. Like just live as simply as you possibly can. Squirrel that money away, invest it early, and then use that to start your business sooner. I was 46, 45 when I started this business. And again, I've had them before. But wow, I just think, what would this business have been like if I'd started when I was 40? And what did I need? 20 grand to get started? That's it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, go into business sooner than later and don't get into debt.
Cool. Are you willing to be a mentor?
Look, I am. I mean, don't have a lot of time, and I mentor people in my company. But if there's the right fit and someone wants to join some of my calls, I'm more than happy to. I can also tell you, I do, I do some training on my YouTube site, and something I'm really excited about that's getting launched next Tuesday is on the Clubhouse platform, which is currently just an iOS only platform. But that's almost like having a radio show where people can pipe up and you can answer questions. So I'm going to be starting that next Tuesday with another niche Salesforce recruiter here in the United States, and possibly add one more mediator. So anyone can jump onto any of those calls. I'm on every Friday with a different group, Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And then I'll be on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. On Clubhouse with a different group. So you can find me by typing in my name or typing in Josh Force into Clubhouse. And then as far as like direct mentorship, I'd be more than happy to if it's the right fit.
Gotcha. Anything that we missed here?
No, I mean, this has been great. Really good questions, Mike. I'm glad to get to be a part of Inspiry. I think it's a really wonderful idea. I think anything that helps people, whether they're 70 years old or 17 years old, looking into, getting a business, being able to learn from other people who've gone through some of the challenges and find inspiration. And really, again, it's all about that belief in yourself and the willingness to iterate. One thing I didn't say is I've been doing this thing. I belong to a group called Asian Efficiency, which is fantastic. It's a great group. I'm a lifetime member there. I've learned so many things. But one of the things that I've learned to do is once a month, I write down all of the accomplishments for the month, and then I write down all the failures also. And then when we get to the year end, I can look at all of them. I've got a whole compilation of everything I sucked at and should learn from, and everything that I did well and did right. And that really helps me to develop a better plan for the next quarter or the next year or whatever it is that I'm planning for. But when we don't track this stuff, we miss out on the successes that we really do need to celebrate. It's not all about, well, I'll be successful when I have a boat, kind of stuff. It shouldn't be like that. Like, what did we learn from? And I think we'll also learn that it often takes twice as long to achieve some of the things that we want to.
Yeah.
We always have these big, giant, ambitious goals, but it does take time. So give yourself that time and learn from your successes and your failures.
Well, you are my first video interview here on Zoom for Inspiry. So thank you for doing that. Thanks for your time.
It's my pleasure, Mike. It's always good to be on here. Happy to come back.
All right. Catch you later.
All right. See you, buddy.
Bye.